Hello, everybody. Yes, it's the American Doofus Show. Don't be a doofus. And we're talking with Chris, our expert in all things military, especially with when it comes to terrorism and security. Chris, thank you so much for giving us a few minutes of your time.
Thank you. It's great to be on your show once again, Barry.
Okay, we've got a lot of new viewers. So just real quick, um, give us just like a elevator 2 minutes of elevator talk, elevator pitch, 2 minutes of your background.
Right. I actually started my career with the Metropolitan Police Department, Washington, D.C. From there, I left to go to the State Department, Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement as an advisor, where I served 2 combat rotations with out of CJSOTF, that's Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force, where it's assigned to Special Forces ODAs, and that's where we did train, advise, and assist. I was doing that for the MOI, Ministry of the Interior, for the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. And like I said, I trained the Afghan National Police, the National Director of Security, and the Afghan local police. And from there, I went on DOD as an advisor, where I used to train the Afghan National Police too, but also on how to deter, disrupt, dismantle terrorist insurgent cells. That's what we actually used to track and arrest bomb makers. So that therefore, they couldn't provide bombs, IEDs to emplacers to hurt coalition U.S. forces, and also the Afghan security forces. And then from there, I went to Academy Training Center, formerly known as Blackwater, as a tactics training specialist, where I used to train Nigerian law enforcement tactical teams. So, some actually have a whole bunch of experience, of course,
Right.
Africa, because I was working at AFRICOM, but then also, working out at CENTCOM as well. But then, of course, now I have my own company, and it deals specifically with irregular warfare, which you're looking at right now, in Ukraine, and of course, in CENTCOM and AFRICOM, anything that deals with terrorism, insurgencies, low intensity conflicts. That's exactly what my company's going to deal with.
Awesome.
It's, stability operations. That's what my company's going to deal with.
Stability operations. And it's, it seems like an incredibly unstable situation. So it seems like in Ukraine, it's a volatile, unstable situation. So your expertise is exactly what we're looking for.
Right. So currently in Ukraine, you have an invasion by the Russian military, done by Putin. Right. So the course of action should be, of course, to resist the invasion. But the thing about it is, you don't know how much logistical support, the military and the civilians are going to have, because eventually they're going to run out of ammunition. Okay.
Right.
So when you start running out of ammunition, then those Russian troops, because those Russian troops have a lot more firepower. They have the missiles and the tanks, and that's the conventional side. Okay. So when those troops become situated or stationed, they're going to start installing their puppet government or their puppet regimes, right? So that's when we start talking about unconventional warfare, guerrilla warfare, to eventually remove that occupier, from that country. So
Okay.
when we talk about insurgencies, we want to talk about insurgencies against the occupier.
Okay. All right. Before we get into that, I want to share something with you and with the viewers here real quick. 2 pieces of some of the intelligence I've been getting, and this is the first time a war has been basically conducted, and social media is providing a lot of the information. So this is what I do, you know, the social media aspect of it, and then the you know, my background in politics, being able to give some analysis. And this I found really troubling. Two separate reports out of many that I've been getting. And last night's episode, I said that Ukrainian intelligence said that Putin was preparing for martial law. And then today we get Russia will step in tomorrow, the third or the fourth day of March, 4/3, because in for those watching in Europe, they put the month first and then the day. So Russia will step in tomorrow, 4/3, into force the law of war, martial law. The borders will be closed so that no one, including foreign labor, can leave the country. All men under the age of 50 will be mobilized into the army regardless of their country. And then from Alec, I left Russia amid reports martial law could be declared and borders closed. Tickets mostly sold out, packed flight. Other passengers said they were afraid to be trapped in Russia, arrested, or conscripted to fight a war they don't support. Don't know if they'll be able to return. So, Chris, it sounds like there could possibly be not only an insurgency of the Ukrainian people against the invading Russian forces. Is there a possibility of an insurgency in Russia against the existing government?
Right. Well, the insurgency against the occupiers in Ukraine, that's definitely going to happen unless the Russians. I just read a report of where the Russians said they're going to start systematically killing civilians. Okay, and that's of course to break their will. You know, to submit. You know,
Right.
to the Russian regime. So we all know that violence, intimidation, and fear are some of the factors that will break an individual's will. Okay.
Right.
So those are the tactics that the Russians are going to use. Okay, violence, fear, intimidation. Those are always, and when it comes to war, those are like three things that are always going to be relevant. Okay, so from that, the insurgency, all right, on the occupiers. First, you have to let them get settled. Okay. Once they get settled, then there's certain things that you can do to delegitimize that puppet regime. Okay, because if you remember, there's many times that we've spoken before, and I always told you community support is the most important in any insurgency. Okay, so if that government doesn't have the community support, then automatically it's going to fail. Okay, so we talk about the puppet regime or the puppet government. Now, behind that was the legitimate government, correct? Which was the ousted government.
Right.
That now that's now going to become the shadow government. Okay. Okay. Where the people will still go back and talk to like the judges, the chiefs of police, and even the former mayor of that local municipality or local city. Okay, because they're the ones that ultimately yield the power because the community has legitimized them. Does that make sense?
Yes, like in Kherson right now, the only major city that Russia has taken in Ukraine. It's exactly what you're saying. What I've been seeing and having reports of is that the Russian force is working through the mayor, even though he's at gunpoint, and through the and through the other existing structures of rural, if you will, in the town, trying to keep the town under control.
Right. See, and that's where the Russian forces are going to lose the support. Okay. So this is from my standpoint, where the insurgency is gonna start. Okay, I told you everything is grassroots.
Mm-hmm.
Stability begins at this grassroots level, right? And you work from the bottom up to gain stability. The Russians are working top down. You see, so
Right.
they're gonna have a problem trying to gain stability, and this is where the uprisings actually start,
Okay.
right from the community.
Um, this is not a flippant question. This is something that I think that needs discussed, that often gets overlooked. In situations like this, what exactly is a civilian? And I know on the surface, it's normally you're either military or civilian, but in situations like this where basically they're handing out AK-47s and they're handing out rocket launchers, rocket propelled grenades. How hard is it to identify in situations like this who's the enemy and who's a innocent civilian, and especially when you're in the heat of battle?
Okay, so if you're not in uniform, okay, you can actually be a combatant,
Okay.
right? But to the guys in uniform, they're not going to know, and that's the same problem we had in Afghanistan and Iraq. You see,
Right.
so the person that has that RPG, right, in civilian clothes and shooting at us, once he shoots that grenade, or shoots that law, or um, puts that AK-47 down, guess what? He's a civilian. You see what I'm saying? He's now
Yeah.
non-combatant.
Yeah. That just it would be, especially if American, we assume American fighting forces follow the rules of engagement and follow the law, but not all countries do so. So
Russia doesn't.
obviously Russia hasn't. Cluster bombs, thermobaric bombs, and really, correct me if I'm wrong, but after unleashing those, they're to ratchet up, they're going to have to go to either chemical or nuclear, aren't they?
Well, it all depends if they get control of these areas. Okay.
Assuming they don't get control of the areas.
Right. If they don't, and then Putin can pretty much level cities. Okay. And I think he did that in Aleppo.
Right.
If I'm correct. He
Yeah,
did that.
just went like block to block and just destroyed until it leveled the entire thing.
Right. Exactly. And I see, if he doesn't get that control of these cities or these areas, he's gonna do the same thing there. I look for patterns of what people have done in the past. All right. And that kind of like predicts the future of what's going to happen. I can make a predictive analysis based upon what you've done before in the past, of what exactly is going to happen in the future. So since he's done that before, then most likely he's going to do that again if he doesn't get, exactly what he wants done.
Yesterday, a MiG was lost. A Romanian MiG was lost, supposedly due to weather. A helicopter, the rescue helicopter that went out to search for the MiG, was what also crashed, and under suspect conditions. Said bad weather. I went and got a weather report. Didn't seem like there was really bad weather. And we being the United States, we're going to do everything we possibly can to not be actively involved. However, if the shoe was on the other foot, would providing intelligence and providing military equipment, would that make us an accomplice, or would that make us active participant? if it was being done to us as we are doing to Russia?
It's kind of like proxy stuff. Remember how we
Okay.
talked about proxies?
Uh-huh.
So it's the same thing in Afghanistan. Remember when the Russians were in Afghanistan?
Uh-huh.
Right. So when we gave support to
The Taliban, basically.
the Mujahideen,
Mujahideen.
right? And we gave them SAMs, and we gave them all sorts of support to defeat the Russians.
Right.
It's kind of like the same thing that you're talking about right now.
Okay.
But I mean, so are we at war with them directly? Indirectly, we are. Directly, we're not.
And
But-
that's the goal of the United States and NATO, to avoid a direct war with Russia.
Exactly.
All right. Then circling back to, if Russia is indeed, if tomorrow they announce all their borders are closed, there's martial law, there are no protests, you can be, and another report I got that I didn't show was that those that have been arrested for protesting have already been conscripted into the military. Now, to me, that's a sign of desperation, because I would think you would want to fight with volunteers and not hostages.
Well, that's how you see things. That's
Yeah.
not how they see things.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
To us, our logic is not their logic. So what they see and how they handle it, maybe there's some things that we don't know about their people that, that, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's they were behind the Iron Curtain for so long. Their culture, the thought process, everything is different. And it's only been 30 years.
Right.
And while that sounds like a long time, when it comes to changing the way someone thinks or the way people think, 30 years isn't that long.
No. So if they have that, okay, you're going to do this, that they're not really free thinkers, they have that, you're going to do this. You're going to say a dictator mentality, right?
Mhm.
So if I tell you to do X, Y, and Z, you're just going to do it. Okay. There's now you have no freedom. You can't think. You're just going to do what you're told to do. That's it.
Or you die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I see that going.
Okay. If indeed Russia does this, and if indeed Russia forces all the males in Russia, whether they're Russian or not, into their army, from some research I've done, that's about 6 million men,
And they're going to be
not counting women. But the Russian culture is still very misogynistic. It's still very pro-male, anti-female as far as equalities go. Is that correct?
I believe it is. I'm not too familiar about
Right.
that area of the world, but
okay. But the point being, 6 million men, are they doing that simply for Ukraine, or would they be doing that for what I've been saying all along, is that Ukraine is a stage and a platform, and it's actually about destroying America?
that's two ways of looking at it. Okay.
Mhm.
First way is, possibly it is for Ukraine, but also they possibly also want to spread out across NATO as well. See what I'm saying?
Mhm.
That is just, and we talked about, all right, NATO or Ukraine is just the first step,
Right.
right? If they want to go into another country, right, or another country, you still have to have that, a good supply of men to go fight for you.
And Moldavia and Georgia, both within the past 24 hours, have requested EU and NATO memberships.
Right. So
They're two small countries that play right into what we're talking about.
Right. So keep in mind, you're going to be losing men as you're going along fighting, and so you have to replenish what you've lost. So that 6 million men, those 6 million men are probably what's going to be needed to overthrow additional countries.
Mm-hmm. It just sounds like it's 6 million. It just sounds like.
But you have to understand, a lot of these countries inflate or over exaggerate.
Right. Right.
That they're really going to be fighting.
I just went to population statistics to find out how many males were in Russia, how big the army could possibly be if they did indeed conscript every male 50 and under.
Yeah, because they're probably just going to inflate numbers, if anything, because I don't see that many. That's a lot of people.
That's a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Bunch of people. And speaking of a bunch of people, Ukraine has announced that their foreign legion is 16,000 troops as of right now. In the past 5 days, 16,000 people have come into Ukraine from foreign nations to fight for Ukraine. That 16,000, that's larger than a lot of small countries' entire military.
You know what? That's just foreign fighters, right? Remember,
Just foreign fighters,
right? Remember in Afghanistan how you had the Taliban, but then you had also other groups of Islamic militants coming in to fight. Same thing here, right?
And by the way, speaking of which, I had a report about 3 days ago. I showed the first Afghan freedom fighter that had come to Ukraine to fight for the freedom of Ukraine, and he was not accepted. and this isn't the time, but I'm going to be doing a segment on race in war. Something that I hadn't even considered as far as a sociological aspect of things, but it's something we need to talk about.
Yeah, but those countries over there in Eastern Europe, those are pretty much homogenous groups of people, right?
And again, they've been behind the Iron Curtain, and they didn't have interaction with the rest of the world, let alone many people of color.
Right. So,
and I'm not saying that to apologize for it. It's just so that we have an understanding.
Right. I mean, it is what it is. So, you know, they may not welcome people that are somewhat different than them. You know, they probably want to stick to their own, you know, when it comes to this type of fighting. You know,
and it's a life and death situation. And if you're standing by somebody to fight, it's a good idea to know a little bit about who you're standing beside.
Exactly. And you're saying he was another fighter from what you said, Afghanistan?
Yeah.
So they're probably like, no thanks. We don't look.
Yeah. But the way it looked was, okay, you're brown and we're white, and you know, we got enough fighters.
But you know what? Those people from Afghanistan, believe it or not, they're actually white people.
I know, but I'm just saying that's the perception.
Right. I mean, but you see that's where ignorance comes in.
Exactly. And the same thing in Palestine. There are white Palestinians, but people that are, if you're from Palestine, you're brown.
Well, I mean, like, once again, I think we had this discussion that Arab is an ethnicity. It has really nothing to do with your race.
Yeah.
I mean, there's white Palestinians, there's Palestinians that are mixed, and they're black Palestinians.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's through the whole Arab community, you know. It's you know, black, because you know, black Arabs, because in Afghanistan, our coalition force, the guys from UAE, and a lot of their soldiers were black. They were black from UAE.
Yeah.
And you know, I was like, cool. And then but the majority of them were like, they're mixed. They look like they're mixed. Okay. They're either mixed or black. There weren't like any Arabs that I saw that had blonde hair and blue eyes. The majority of them were, they're kind of like olive skin with black hair and dark eyes, or you know, they're brown skin or black. And you know, you would no one ever think that they were Arab. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. You just think like, oh, that's another black guy, or he might be from Africa. But until they open their mouths, they're like, oh, that's an Arab. You know, so.
Okay. Now let's delve into what's going to be happening. Let's get into your expertise. Russia is in there. They've been in there for 7 days. They're bogged down. They got this massive convoy, a 40-mile convoy, 17 miles from Kyiv and stretching back for about 40 miles. Would you wait for that convoy to encircle and then start attacking, or would you be beginning the insurgency while that convoy is either stalled or reorganizing or resupplying or whatever it is?
Well, once it starts moving, I would start ambushes with the ambushes, and just make it very difficult for them to move. Which is going to create more time for those other troops in the cities to prepare. You see?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm able to disable vehicles, sabotage, whatever, that's what I think Ukrainian forces need to do. Drone strikes, however they want to do it. But just as long as that convoys aren't able to make it to those destinations, we'll be doing all right. Because the whole purpose is to stop that convoy. And we've seen that so many times in Afghanistan. Like, we be going from point A to point B in a convoy, and we get hit with IEDs and then small arms fire from the Taliban, just to make sure, we don't make it to that, to that destination. So it's kind of like the same concept here.
Okay. Talk about Molotov cocktails. They seem to be pretty effective. They seem to be easy to produce, obviously, and they seem to be pretty effective from what I've been seeing.
Well, if it's effective, you keep it going because you can't, because they can't stop it, right?
Right.
That's one of the things of doing violence of action. If you have a technique that actually works and keeps working, why would you stop? So
and speaking of that, you mentioned you were kind enough to share something with me about what Finland did in 1939 when the Soviets tried to attack Finland. And talk about that a little bit. Is it time for countries to stop investing so much in these big, massive
conventional
conventional warfare machines? Is it time to start training citizens?
Yeah, here's my opinion. All right. If you have a conventional army coming in like you have right now in Ukraine, smaller guerrilla forces are always best because they're mobile, they're smaller, they can move faster and quicker, hit and run tactics, harassment. They're gonna defeat a larger conventional military all the time, and you've already seen it. Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq. All right, those are three. Those are just three examples. Okay, we had everything, all the technology, all the firepower, everything. We still got beat at all three fronts. You see what I'm saying? By smaller, more mobile groups, and they were always on the offensive. They do hit and run, bang, 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 and then they're gone. Who did it? You don't know. They drop their weapons and blend right back into the community. How are you ever going to find out?
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes back to, who's a citizen? How do you determine citizen and combatant? And
a lot of times you can't.
You can't. And the big war machines, the big tanks, the big, those are intimidating. But if people get past that intimidation, you find out that they're easily defeated.
Yes, all day. You see with the RPGs, right? And they're using the with the javelin missiles, but those are really heavy. RPGs are pretty relatively light.
Yeah, and then the NLAWs, the NLAW, shoulder mounted single fire.
But I mean, all those vehicles, those tanks are all stoppable. you know. So just because you got a tank, or I got something to counter what you have, you know, and that's where a lot of that, you know, a lot of that's going to come into play, or the countermeasures, you know. So like with the helicopters, you have the Stinger missiles. In the aircraft, you have the Stinger missiles, right? The
Hmm.
man pads
Man
to
pads. Yeah.
right to that's the counter for aircraft. You see, and then for like the tanks, the counter is going to be like the RPG, or the Law, or even the Javelin missiles. So
Primarily fired at their tracks
right,
to
right,
keep them from, yeah, to,
exactly,
to just keep them from being mobile.
right. And then for the artillery, my understanding that the those Ukrainian special forces guys were tracking down where the artillery was coming from, and catching the individuals launching the artillery. And I guess they were at one point. I heard they were starting to kill them.
Yeah,
But they,
I was just about to mention that the head of the Ukrainian special forces announced that they're no longer taking prisoners.
right,
That if you're a member of the artillery and you've been shelling civilians, that you're not going to be taken prisoner. They're coming to kill you.
right, right. So um, if you're able to stop those three things, right, the air, the tanks, right, and the artillery, guess what? All you have left is the guys with
Infantry.
the gun, and guessing you can beat them.
Yeah.
You see, you
Yeah.
can beat them. So um, it's really going to be about your countermeasures, right? And once again, community support, and what type of training you've actually had to defeat those troops. So
No.
we go back to the training. The training is very, very important. You just and I was talking to this about, about with one of my friends, how they said they're just giving out guns and ammo to the civilians. I'm like, well, that's not really effective, because
Yeah, that's what I thought when I first heard it.
right. I mean, it looks good, but if you haven't been properly trained on those weapon systems, how effective do you really think you're going to be?
Yeah.
That's the thing. So
But
I think
at the same time, if it's an AK-47, they're not that hard to operate. Once you
it's
figure out how to load
right.
it, you point and shoot.
Right, but here's the thing: you have to look at the effectiveness, and how far you can shoot it. How
That's
effective
true.
that weapon, is is good.
That's a relatively close range weapon.
Right, right. I think like 300 meters is effective, really effective range. Anything further than like 300 meters, you're kind of pushing things. And you have to remember the individual shooting these guns. We go back to the training. If you haven't been trained on something like that, how do you think you're going to be able to hit the target? These people are going to be moving. They're not stationary.
Right.
It's there's a whole lot involved with this.
And also it's one thing to say, well, I'm going to go get a gun and I'm going to defend my country. But it's another thing to actually be standing there and have a draw and have somebody in your sights and pull the trigger.
Yeah, and there's another thing too, when someone's shooting back at you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's not just you shooting at somebody. These people are going to be shooting back at you.
Right.
So there's something there that people really need to think about. It's not just one sided.
I know. And people don't think about that. I've been hearing, well, let's start giving them, let's give them fighter planes. Let's give them Patriot missiles. Let's give them A-10 Warthogs. You got to know how to use them.
Exactly.
And it's not something you just, you don't take you don't go watch a YouTube video or to learn how to fly an A-10 Warthog.
Right, right. So that takes time and training, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how long it takes to train a pilot, because that's not my area of
Right.
expertise. But it takes time, And if you just, oh, here, we're gonna put you in this plane and you're gonna fly this, and you'd be like, what? I don't know, what the heck I'm doing, but you want me to do it. So I listen. What people just talk out of the sides of their neck without really knowing what's really involved when it comes to this.
Right.
They really don't. So you have to remember who's saying X, Y, and Z. You know, because a lot of these people don't have any experience doing any of this stuff, but they always want to put out what they think is best.
Right.
Okay.
And that's why I come to you, because I've never been on the ground involved in a firefight.
Right.
And so I'm not going to talk about, I'm going to go to somebody that has,
right.
and that can share with our listeners and viewers what to expect.
Right. And the thing about it is you always talk to people that have the relevant experience. Okay. I'm really, really big on that.
Right.
If I'm talking to someone and they say, oh, you know, they're a subject matter expert and they have like a PhD, a master's, you know, they graduated from Harvard and went to Oxford. My first question is, what is your relevant experience actually doing this besides your research and you writing books? What have you really done on the ground?
Right.
If you haven't spent like at least 5-6 years on the ground doing anything like this, I will never talk to you, and I never consider you to be credible because you don't know.
Totally get that. Totally get that. Totally get that. All right. A lot of people thought that, and myself included, that Ukraine would not hold out even as long as they have. It's only been just over a week. How long does this go?
That I can't answer. Okay. I know that eventually Russia is going to start occupying a lot of these cities. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And once they start occupying these cities, it's going to be up to the citizens. Right.
And this is where we're talking about the insurrections.
Right. And the resistance movements. Right. To go against those occupiers, you know, and their puppet regimes which they've installed. That's where the fight really begins. I mean, the fight's already begun, but once they've settled, then let's see what happens, because now it's gonna be a long, drawn out fight. This is like in any insurgency, you have to have money. Okay. Economics, I told you, controls all.
Right. That we're still United States is still importing oil from Russia.
Yeah, right. But yet the whole world sanctioning Russia. We're sanctioning Russia, but we're still getting oil.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, how does that make sense? That's not even it's not even logical. But anyway, the whole thing about it is this: it's the community economics, okay, and then the community support. Okay. If you have the economics and community support, you're going to be able to beat, you know, those occupiers the same way you saw in Afghanistan when the Mooj beat the Russians, and you saw what happened with us in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty much the same thing. Yeah, okay, we were there to get rid of AQ, but eventually we became occupiers of that country in Afghanistan, and the Taliban was like, "No, you're not." And it took some time, but eventually, you see who left, right?
Right.
We did.
Right.
So did everyone. Excuse me, in ISAF, right? International Security Assistance Forces, right? So they're all out. We're out. Who's the victor? The Taliban. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, and they and the Taliban, on day one of the Russian invasion, the Taliban came out and called for
peace.
They called for peace and dialogue. Right? They were the voice of reason.
Yeah, right. Imagine that.
All right. Just two more things. The Battle of Castle. Since we were talking about the Middle East, in Syria, where 40 United States Special Forces went up against this Wagner group and some Syrian fighters. A little known battle that kind of introduced the Wagner group to the world. They've been involved, allegedly involved in Burkina Faso, Mali, Mozambique, and I had a report that 400 of them were in Kyiv with the goal of assassinating Ukrainian President Zelensky, and that they were ratted out by former Russian spies that are now working for Ukraine, and that all 400 of them were neutralized.
That human intelligence is in warfare is always king. You know, intelligence wins wars. Right? So obviously, Ukraine had some Russian spies that I don't know if they became double agents or they just started working for Ukraine, and they dimed out. Hey, look, you got these guys coming. Here they are. Take them out before and get to you. You know, and that's pretty much what happened. So, and to go back on the Wagner, it's been my opinion, and from what I've seen, when it comes to this type of fighting, all right, in the Mozambique, you had it was an insurgency. So you had like this group called Al-Shabaab, all right, which has no real affiliation with Al-Shabaab in Somalia. Okay, they were just called Al-Shabaab, and they're a group of insurgents, Islamic militants, and they pretty much beat the Wagner group, and the Wagner group pretty much had to leave Mozambique. But once again, I think they were actually there, and they were there guarding the oil refineries and stuff like that. In the end, but the Wagner group said, "Hey, you know what? We want to help with the insurgency. You know, we'll be the counterinsurgents. You know, we'll beat these guys." And guess what? They took a L.
Yeah,
they lost. Right? They took a big loss. And then going into Mali as well. You know, we talked about that I think on the last show.
right.
And the whole issue was the natural resources. You know, how Mali kicked out the French, and I think a lot of members of the EU and the UN, right? So those groups are still, I'm sure, kind of angry because they're getting cut out of their money, right? Where the Wagner group is in there now, and they're getting those natural resources, because a lot of these countries don't pay like monetarily, they'll pay you with the natural resources. That's where everything's going now, right?
Mhm.
Everyone gets paid with natural resources. So, and even in Burkina Faso, it's going to be the same thing. You see, what in Burkina Faso, the reason why I think the government was overthrown was because the Burkina Faso president said that he did not want the Wagner group in Burkina Faso, right? But they had a military commander. I'm sure the Russians paid him off, right? You know, because once again, the economics, right? Paid him off, and he had all the military support behind him, so he could easily overthrow the government. You see, and he eventually became, you know, the leader of Burkina Faso, and they arrested the president, and they brought in the Wagner group. You see, so that's how a lot of stuff actually works. Now they're gonna end up, getting like a lot of the natural resources, and that commander is, he's pretty much set for life, right?
Yeah. So the Wagner group is maybe not as formidable as some people in the community thought. Is the Russian army a paper tiger?
We're about to find out.
Is it not as formidable and powerful as some have thought by what we're seeing early stages in Ukraine? Or is it a possibility Russia is not even involving its best yet. They're saving their best for what's
Yeah,
down the road.
here's the thing. They could be testing. They could be testing the waters. Okay. All right. So the first wave, we'll just see, how they respond. If they lay down, then, we're good. If they resist, okay, we'll step up a level of force and keep, if they keep resisting, we'll just hammer them, into submission. Okay. That's kind of like, that's what I see.
Okay.
Not that I'm right, but that's
All right.
what I see. Okay.
All right.
There's no sense of just, coming down with the hammer immediately if you don't have to. Right.
Right.
So, I think Putin was, just coming in and, okay, he thought they just be quite submissive very
Okay.
quickly. And
that's what bullies do. They assume that they're not going to ever have to confront you. They just show up and you're going to cower.
Right. Well, as you can see, the Ukrainians didn't. So,
No.
yeah, I think he's just going to up the ante a little bit and, start to drop the hammer a lot more in a lot of cities in all of the country of Ukraine.
Okay. One final thing. Speaking of dropping the hammer, tactical nuclear weapons.
Okay. What's your question?
Is it feasible? Is it part of is it part of Russian philosophy?
That I don't know. Okay, that I don't know.
If tactical nuclear weapons were going to be used, how would Russia do that? Any idea?
They might hit NATO countries. Okay, of course, automatically elicit a response from other NATO countries, because I think one of the NATO leaders that I don't know if it's France or whatever, they came out and said, well, we have nukes.
France, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, so do they.
Yeah.
There's no sense of, trying to be like, I'm bigger than you.
Yeah.
When matter of fact, I think they have the most nukes. Russia has the most nukes
They do.
in the world, right?
Yeah.
So why would you even sit there and go at someone like that?
Yeah.
To me,
France has about 300 nukes. Russia has about 6,000.
Yeah. So that's like, why would you even sit there and say that? That's to me, that's just, it doesn't make any sense.
Okay. Not dropping a big nuclear warhead, but having nuclear devices on missiles, smaller medium range missiles. Would they do that to Ukraine, with Ukraine being so close to them, or is it more likely that if something attacks, it's either here or in Europe, so that the fallout is less?
I don't know if they would actually do something like that in Ukraine. Maybe in some other countries, maybe. But
and you and I are sitting here speculating as rational human beings, where the one person that actually going to make the decision is Vladimir Putin, who may be gravely ill.
Right. So tell me, what would he have to lose?
What does he have to lose?
What does he have to lose? So he could easily just come out and be like, you know what, I'm ill, I'm gonna die. I'll just wipe everybody out. Who cares?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a reality that we have to have in our head.
Exactly.
My man, thank you so much for giving us your time.
Well, thank you for having me on your show, Bear.
Always a pleasure. You stay safe. And I did the one thing we talked about off air. I just as when we were doing this, I got a response by text that the guy doesn't know anybody. So,
okay.
But I'll keep trying.
Great. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care, my friend. I look forward to talking with you next time.
All right. Take care now.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Okay.